Key intermediaries, through which Moscow exports oil in defiance of sanctions, have entered into open warfare. Competing traders from Dubai, Hong Kong, and Singapore are now helping the West identify weaknesses in Russia's shadow oil network. As Bloomberg reports, citing data from market participants, companies involved in the sale of Russian oil have begun openly exposing each other to Western sanctions in an attempt to weed out competitors. At the center of the conflict are oil trade veteran Murtaza Lakhani and two Azerbaijani entrepreneurs, Etibar Eyub and Tahir Garayev. According to the agency, these traders have been transporting hundreds of millions of barrels of Russian oil since 2022, helping Rosneft circumvent Western restrictions following the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. However, now the fight between them has gotten out of control. Associates of Eyub and Garayev attempted to publish articles in Russian media detailing Lakhani's dealings with Rosneft in order to attract the attention of Western regulators and secure sanctions against him. In response, Lakhani launched his own campaign aimed at drawing the authorities' attention to the activities of his Azerbaijani competitors. Following investigations and publications, the EU and the UK imposed sanctions against the Eyub and Garayev network in 2024. This has made their operations much more difficult. Banks, insurance companies, and logistics firms have begun to avoid working with them to avoid risk themselves. As a result, their costs rose. Insurance premiums became more expensive. Supply routes became longer and less transparent, and the price per barrel fell as brokers and refiners demanded compensation for the risk. The conflict between the traders, according to Bloomberg, led to multi-billion-dollar losses, not only for the intermediaries themselves, but also for Rosneft and the Russian economy as a whole. Due to rising costs and loss of trust from counterparties, Moscow is losing part of its export revenues, and its system for circumventing sanctions is becoming increasingly ineffective. Analysts say the situation demonstrates the fragility of the systems through which Russia exports oil. The Kremlin effectively depends on a narrow circle of opaque intermediaries operating through offshore companies and Asian jurisdictions. Internal conflicts and personal greed make the system ungovernable. Media reported that India's largest buyer has abandoned Russian oil following US sanctions against Russian oil companies. This refers to Reliance, which is now looking toward Middle Eastern oil. According to traders, Reliance has purchased at least 10 million barrels of oil on the spot market, including Saudi Arabia's Hafji, Iraq's Basra Medium, Qatar's Al Shaheen, and American WTI. Deliveries are expected in December and June. Reliance was previously India's largest buyer of Russian oil and actively took advantage of the discounts Moscow offered amid sanctions pressure. However, new US restrictions made trading with Russian suppliers risky. Banks began refusing to process payments, and insurance companies began refusing to cover cargoes linked to Russia. Now the Indian giant is forced to seek more stable and secure sources of supply. Analysts note that Reliance's shift to Middle Eastern oil is a signal to the entire Asian market. Even Russia's long-standing partners are beginning to turn their backs on it under pressure from reality. Thus, US sanctions have already led to significant changes in global energy trade. Moscow is losing one of its key customers, and India is demonstrating that it is not prepared to risk its economic stability to maintain dubious arrangements with the Kremlin. After months of Russian officials bragging about destroying Ukrainian energy facilities, the war has turned full circle. Russia is now tasting its own medicine, as massive Ukrainian retaliation strikes on critical energy infrastructure has plunged entire Russian regions into darkness. In Belgorod, chaos reigns, and what Russia inflicted on Ukraine in previous winters is now being inflicted on Russia itself, and this time it is Moscow declaring a national emergency. RFU News media outlet says Belgorod governor Vyacheslav Gladkov urged residents to find alternative power sources and rely on generators after Ukrainian missiles and drones wiped out the city's main power systems. But the order borders on absurdity. Due to Russia's worsening fuel crisis, local authorities have simultaneously prohibited citizens from filling jerry cans with gasoline, the very fuel these generators run on. Panic spread quickly as residents realized there was no backup plan or realistic solution coming from the government. Gas stations were ordered to conserve supplies for critical infrastructure only, leaving civilians trapped in the dark. The crisis began after a wave of Ukrainian strikes against Belgorod's energy network. Locals reported loud explosions followed by immediate blackouts as Ukrainian drones first hit key transformers throughout the city. Within hours, another barrage hit the Belgorod thermal power plant, leaving 40,000 people without electricity. Footage shows the Luch power substation engulfed in flames, with emergency services unable to contain the fire. RFU News says Kursk region soon followed as Ukrainian drones hit transmission lines, causing widespread outages. Ukrainian official Andriy Kovalenko confirmed both Belgorod and Kursk were without power, as the Russians just received what they were looking for. President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned for weeks that if Russia resumed its winter terror campaign on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, Ukraine would strike back in kind, and Russians would feel the same in their cities, even if it meant blackouts in Moscow itself. The Russian military and political command ignored the warning, and now the results are evident. Chief of the Ukrainian General Staff, Andriy Natov, reinforced the message, stating that Ukraine will find the means and the weapons to carry out proportional retaliation, regardless of distance or Russian air defenses. The Ukrainian counterstrikes didn't stop at the border. For several consecutive nights, Ukrainian drones and missiles hit power facilities deep inside Russia, demonstrating both reach and precision. In Bryansk region's Klintsy, a thermal power plant erupted in flames after a combined strike, the explosion captured by locals and shared widely online. In the Vladimir region, a 750 kilovolt substation, a critical node in central Russia's energy grid, was disabled. In Ilyanovsk, the 500 kilovolt Feshkama substation was struck by multiple drones, causing cascading power failures across the region, RFU News says. The attack on Samara's Kinel-Cherkasy substation followed, knocking out another major link in Russia's interconnected grid. Hours later, Volgograd's Balashovkaya substation went up in flames, disrupting the power transfer from the Volskaya hydroelectric station. The strikes reached as far as Nizhny Novgorod, where 6 Ukrainian long-range drones reportedly hit a key energy facility, cutting power to over 200,000 residents and shutting down industrial zones, with even mobile phone networks collapsing. When the region's governor called the communications and electricity blackout a healthy detox, residents responded with fury, accusing local authorities of lying and avoiding the problem, while their homes froze and their businesses shut down. Moscow's official line is denial, yet the scale of damage is undeniable. Emergency crews are stretched thin, fires rage across several substations, and the power grid is fragmented under sustained pressure. With the first snow falling, many regions are facing rolling blackouts, and local governments have begun rationing electricity to critical infrastructure only. Overall, Ukraine's message is clear, and for every blackout Russia causes, it will face one at home. This winter, the tables have turned, as Ukrainian domestically produced long-range drones and missiles are now able to strike hundreds of kilometers into Russian territory with a precision and consistency it did not have in previous years. After months of ignoring warnings, Russia is now forced to experience what it once weaponized: darkness, cold, and fear, RFU News reports. As Russian officials declare an energy emergency and struggle to restore power, Ukraine has transformed from a victim of energy terror into a master of retaliation. The lights may be out in Belgorod, Kursk, and Novgorod, But surely Moscow may follow soon.